Hey there, everyone from Level 1. This is Bloody Knux and Akumu here with a brand new game. Thanks so much. With Phantom Brigade, a turn-based mech strategy game. And as you can see here, that Akumu right now is actually going into the tutorial, getting a little bit of a hands-on action. Almost looks like a sci-fi kind of XCOM game. So I think you're supposed to left-click on them.
Yeah.
Oh, try checking the little arrow right there underneath them. There you go.
Got it.
Ah, okay, there we go.
I see. I see now.
So, Akumu, I was like, my dear, I was like, you've played a few strategy games before, haven't you? Or turn-based games?
Hold on. I can't really hear you with the headphones on, to be fair.
Here, you want me to give me one second? Oh, wait, no, no. Okay, hang on. Trying to make sure it doesn't get too much on here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, which is literally what I was doing, moving the headphones.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. If you have
Okay.
any questions.
Hey, so we have one of the team here helping out. And
Hi, my name is Josh.
Hi there, Josh. So we were talking here a little bit that we have a turn-based, mech game here. What more
Right.
can you tell us about Phantom Brigade?
So Phantom Brigade is in fact a turn-based strategical role-playing game. It's single player, and what makes it unique from a lot of other turn-based role-playing games is this unique timeline aspect that's a little bit sort of like the timeline in an animation program or a video editor. And it shows you 5 seconds into the future what your enemy's going to be doing. And so you have to position your attacks in time and as well as space. And then it also doesn't use the usual grid or hex grid like a turn-based game. It's in a fully simulated 3D world. And the weather is simulated, the weapons are simulated, and so everything is destructible, and if you cause collisions, they'll explode. And so it's just very cinematic and really immersive because of all the extra levels of stuff they've added in.
Okay. Well, I see she's right now learning about the timeline, but when you say destructible and everything collides and works together, that literally speaks out to her because she likes watching things get destroyed.
I do.
Fantastic, yeah. A thing that occurred to me when I started playing this was that it's an unusually fun game to be a new player at or not be super good at yet because the unpredictability of it, you get the mayhem and explosions and chaos, and so even when things aren't going right, they're still going very entertainingly.
And that's actually interesting because I've played a lot of the turn-based, very strategy games, a lot of XCOM and stuff like that. So you mentioned that it's not the traditional hex grid, which is very different because you think that a lot of those games are very much, here's a grid, you move within that grid, set number of movements. So here you have things moving in this timeline right here, and you talked about how it's more, the movement is based in a general area. It's not exactly like, hey, you're going to be in this exact square. No, it's like, hey, you're going to move in this area, and your characters will kind of just adapt to that. So that I find that very interesting, especially with the fact that you talk about how everything's all simulated as well, between the weather and how you're able to kind of see how the enemy is going to move to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up with everything. So it takes a little bit more dynamic aspect of the strategic maneuvering.
Yeah, exactly. I think the time. Everything's still turn-based, and you're waiting for stuff to play out when you're done. So it's not more realism, I guess, but verisimilitude. It feels more real, more deep. I think because of that extra layer of the time.
Absolutely. So that actually gives a very unique. That gives a very uniqueness to the way that it all plays out, because then it gives a much different feel that's not normal. And I'm seeing here that we're looking at her using the timeline. I see where she sees her movement. Is that red square right there where it shows the attack? Is that where the enemy will attack during that time if she goes that way?
Right. So it looks like she's got maybe an enemy unit selected right now. So you're seeing the exact timing and positioning of the enemy's movement and attack.
Okay. So Akuma, what do you think you're gonna do to stop this attack from happening?
Probably die, to be fair.
Well, at least she's honest about everything. Dying is always a possibility and definitely an option. Not a viable option, mind you, but it is an option. But it seems that she's getting set up for the attack. But can she get the attack in first before them? So right here we're seeing a little bit of the timeline in the combat here. So tell us a little bit more about how combat plays out.
Yeah, so like I say, the timeline goes out to 5 seconds, but the prediction gets fuzzier as that 5 seconds goes along. So you can occasionally have things not go quite according to plan. And then you mentioned defeat earlier. Another thing is that you have a mobile base, and your units and your pilots and everything are limited resources. So depending on how your combat turns out, that'll affect the rest of the game. And farther along in the game, there's a whole open world map, and it plays out in a non-linear way. Like any playthrough will be different, and so there's really a big impact in the way that the combat ends up that contributes to how everything else works, how other factions will perceive you, what you can do in the future, how your whole game will work. So yeah, it really has a big snowball effect on everything else in the game.
Okay, so it's almost like your traditional XCOM style strategy games is that you have your characters. If they die, then you know they're dead.
Right.
And then you know it. Sometimes a mission goes south, and your whole relationship with other countries in the world or whatever, you know, goes south, and how they're all gonna react to your moves or what choices you make when you leave like some other countries to be left in danger. In this one, you know, some factions may be more aggressive instead of being more allied towards you.
Right, yeah, it'll be harder to get them to help you, you know, get the bad guys out of there. You have to use more convincing, more fighting. Yeah, everything has consequences and comes back around.
All right. Well, that's definitely interesting to see how they take on it. And you were saying like the way that you get further along the timeline, things may not necessarily happen. Like how this may happen in the first 2 seconds, that's a little bit closer to what will actually happen. But when you look at later on, whatever move may be there may not actually be how it plays out.
Exactly, and then since things are simulated as well, you might, you know, sort of have everything lined up so that it ought to work properly, but your mechs will react to the combat around them. They'll bash into things, and so you know your planning can go awry a little bit. So there's a little bit of chaos, you know, that kind of like reality check that you know the grounds kind of messed me up, or I didn't quite see that coming out of left field.
And this one right here, Akumu definitely is a very strict. What's funny is she doesn't play strategy games a lot, but she enjoys them when she plays them. But she's the most strategic person I know because she literally will think everything out methodically. So kind of knowing that having enough experience in XCOM games, how you can have a 95% chance to hit something and still miss up close, and then have your character just die in one random turn. I know how fast that things can go south.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's despite all your hard work, there's always a little bit of an element of unpredictability that really adds like a lot of life to the whole thing, I think.
And it looks like she made the right call. It's like she pulled her mechs away from the combat so one can do a run and gun on the tank while it's making a turn, trying to push on them.
Yeah, which I think is one of the game's other really good points is that you can do movement and attacking simultaneously. So it's like yet another like dimension of strategy that gets added on there. Time, space, you know, what's happening at the same time, one thing after another.
Absolutely. I was like, that does give it a very unique sense because it literally gives it more of that mobile kind of feel instead of just, oh, hey, you only can attack, but then you can't move, or you move and then attack. But here you're able to do it both at the same time, and it really kind of gives that flexibility on how the game will play out, especially with combat.
Yeah, and then you can also string attacks, do different attacks with different weapons. And yeah, so again, that time element really like adds an amazing amount of extra strategy.
All right, well, that's really cool. So, Akuma, what do you feel is going to be your next step here? Because you pulled your team back behind the rocks.
Right, well, I needed cover. I'm trying not to die.
Yep.
But
I see here.
I'm hoping, like I said, I'm hoping cover, and then depending how it goes, you know me, I like taking my pot shots. I like cover and taking my pot shots if possible.
You definitely do. Well, let me ask you a quick question here.
Sure.
When is the game looking to launch? I was like, what platforms are you looking to be on, and when can people expect it?
So the game is in early access now on the Epic Store. It'll be out in full release sometime early next year.
Okay.
And this is Nikita, designer of the game.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Hi there, Nikita. Guys, we have the designer here on the game. How's it going, Nikita?
Good. It's been great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. We're having a great time here sitting down with the game and getting our hands on with it. Akumu, who's very, very noobish, I'll say, but she's kind of she's done a lot of these games, but she doesn't do them a lot, so she's enjoying it so far. So what kind of came up with your designs for how you wanted to simulate this? Because so far, just the system itself is very dynamic and very different from traditional, strategy games. When people look at these kind of turn-based, strategy simulations, games like XCOM and everything else under the sun, that it's very rigid, it's all grid-based, it's very turn-based, you can only attack when you attack, you move first. Here you have a lot of flexibility with it. What kind of went into that thought process?
Yeah, we sort of noticed those all the issues that you listed, and we tried to come up with a system that would allow players to sort of have a planning phase and then sort of enjoy the show and see all the cool effects in a very cinematic way. And we feel that it kind of breaks that monotony of just planning and never really getting to see it all play out. And that's actually something that we're still iterating on. We're adding replay features so players can see more of that as they play. And I think originally the initial prototype for the game was more like XCOM, but we noticed an opportunity to make it more like it is now, and that's what we've been pursuing since then.
Okay, very interesting. And we're seeing here now how I know he mentioned that the whole timeline is working out, and now we're seeing that there's a bigger combat scene here. We see that she's going up against about 6 different enemies and having to make time all within this time here, and we're really seeing this whole plan out phase is significantly different than anything that people usually are used to. So for people who are new to the genre or just kind of new to strategy games in general, maybe veterans who have played it, what do you have advice for them, or what can you kind of recommend about the game?
Yeah, I think we're trying to cater to both advanced players who are familiar with those games, but also players who are new. And I think the cinematic aspects helps with that as well, because it allows players to sort of ease into the combat rather than being sort of overwhelmed with all the tactics. They're also, the way the game is set up is usually players are outnumbered and outgunned most of the time, but they have the time prediction. And that gives them a huge advantage of how to utilize the environment, how to utilize their team to make kind of the most of what they have. Because in Phantom Brigade, all the equipment that you get for your team is looted from enemies, whatever you manage not to destroy. So we usually try to encourage newer players to sort of proceed with caution, but also kind of have fun and enjoy. And usually that works out quite well. Many players in our community, for example, one of their favorite tactics is sort of like ram the enemy mech with a shield into a building. And even though it's not the most elegant way to play the game, it works and it's strategically sound. So we can encourage players to find their own play style, whatever that is, and try to support that through all the different game mechanics, weapons, armors, and kind of systems that exist in the game.
Okay, that's really cool that you're actually looking at being able to cater to those, because you think that most devs, when they see that gamers are playing the game that not the way it was intended, they either will either let it slide, just kind of let them have at it, or they'll kind of be like, no, that's really not how it should work. We're gonna kind of pull back on that. But here you're like, okay, well, someone literally thought to take a giant shield and just ram a mech into the building, disable them that way. It may not necessarily be the most elegant. They may get injured in it, but they can do that. And you're like, if you want to do that, go ahead.
And to kind of further iterate on that, this is just the combat layer. There's a bigger overworld layer where players kind of liberate their country. And one example that I like to give is in traditional tactics games, you usually can snowball into a defeat quite easily. Whilst what we're trying to do, because you're building this squad of pilots and trying to liberate kind of build your story in a free-form way, we don't want players restarting the game really. So if you lose all of your pilots or all of your mechs, you can always roll back to the mobile base, just kind of retreat, and we'll give you a fresh set of pilots and mechs that allow you to continue playing the same campaign and sort of recover by maybe being a bit more careful, looting some convoys, but not requiring you to restart hours upon hours of interesting gameplay and story that evolves as you play.
That's actually really interesting, and especially for someone who's new. I know, as I mentioned here, Akumu, how many of these strategy games have you played before in the past?
I mean, there's a few. Like I used to, and I get this from my dad, to be fair, but I used to play like StarCraft a lot.
So you have a lot of history with RTSs, because I know you mentioned that your father played a lot of those as well with StarCraft and things like that. So you kind of know in RTSs how quickly those can also snowball, even when you're like build up all this, and mentioning how badly things can go south when you lose a strong team. You think that in games like XCOM, when you have one strong team, yeah, you'll try and bring some of the newer, the rookie kind of characters to kind of level them up. But when you lose all your veterans, it makes it hard because of the fact that it takes so much longer to have to go back and retrain them. So at that point, either people will tend to, reload before that mission, or depending on how the save system works, have to go back significantly. And if they can try to continue, sometimes those newer characters aren't prepared for the new, stronger enemies that are going to show up later on in the game, and then it quickly goes down.
Yeah, and we try to give players a lot of tools to sort of mitigate that, where they can be more cautious or more aggressive on the overall. They can try different tactical approaches, maybe call in a home army to help them in certain battles where they feel like they're a bit underprepared. There's also plenty of systems for how to customize your mech and maybe cater to certain playstyles that would allow you to be more effective in different missions. If players are looking for that depth and complexity, it's there, but they can also be kind of brute force their way if that's the playstyle that caters more to what they want to see in the game.
Okay, well, that's really awesome to hear, and that's definitely interesting. I know that he had mentioned that the game is currently out in early access, correct?
Yeah, it's an early access on the Epic Store and will be releasing in full on Steam early in the next year.
Okay, and next year, are y'all only focusing on PC, or y'all looking at expanding to maybe other platforms such as consoles?
Currently, we're only focusing on PC, but if the game will do well, then we can investigate further avenues for how to, where to ship it.
Okay. And what is the price for the game for those who are interested in looking at getting the game?
I think around $30 right now, Canadian. So.
Okay, well, there you go, guys. That was our little interview sitting here with Nikita. So thank you so much, Nikita, for coming and talking with us real quick about Phantom Brigade. But we're going to let Akumu just take it off from here and let her do her thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.